The old man's hands were shaking as he placed the ancient scroll on the table. "This technique has been hidden for 300 years, he whispered. "It will make you unstoppable, but there's one condition." Bruce Lee looked at the scroll, then at the old man. "If you ever use this for fame, for money, for your films, it will destroy you, and everyone you love." Hong Kong, March 1972. Bruce Lee sat in his apartment, reviewing footage from The Big Boss, his first major film, the one that was about to make him a star across Asia. But something was bothering him. The fight choreography was good, but not great. It lacked something, a certain authenticity, a depth that traditional martial arts had, but modern cinema couldn't capture. There was a knock at the door, not the doorbell, an actual knock. 3 times. Deliberate, patient. Bruce opened the door. An old man stood there, ancient, maybe 80 or 90 years old, thin as bamboo, wearing traditional Chinese robes that looked like they'd been carefully preserved for decades. His face was weathered like old leather, but his eyes were sharp, clear, almost luminescent. "Bruce Lee," the old man said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes. Can I help you?" "No, but I can help you." The old man's Cantonese was formal, old-fashioned, the kind spoken by masters in ancient temples. "May I come in?" Something in Bruce's instincts said yes. He stepped aside. The old man entered slowly, taking in the apartment. Movie posters on the walls, training equipment in the corner, scripts scattered across the table. He nodded as if confirming something. "You're searching," the old man said, sitting without being invited, "for something your films are missing. A technique, a philosophy, something that makes what you do more than entertainment." Bruce felt a chill. "How do you? I've seen your demonstrations, your teachings, your films. You have great skill, but you're incomplete." "Incomplete how?" The old man reached into his robes and pulled out a scroll. Not paper, silk, ancient silk, yellowed with age, carefully rolled and tied with red cord. The characters written on the outside were so old, Bruce could barely read them. "This," the old man said, placing it on the table, "contains a technique created 300 years ago by a master named Chen Wu. He developed it after 40 years of study, combining elements from 7 different martial arts styles. It was said that anyone who mastered this technique became unstoppable, could defeat any opponent. But Chen Wu never taught it publicly. Why not? Because it's too powerful, too dangerous. Chen Wu saw what happened when lesser martial artists gained fame. They became arrogant, violent, destructive. So he wrote this technique down, hid it, and made his last student swear an oath. Only teach this to someone pure of heart, someone who seeks mastery, not glory." Bruce stared at the scroll. "And you think that's me? I know it is. I've watched you refuse lucrative offers to compromise your art. I've watched you teach anyone who truly wants to learn, regardless of race or status. I've watched you put philosophy above profit. You're ready." The old man stood slowly. "But there's one condition. You must never use this technique for your films. Never demonstrate it publicly. Never teach it for money. This is sacred. If you violate this oath, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" The old man's eyes darkened. Chen Wu's last student violated the oath, taught the technique to a warlord for gold. Within a year, everyone he loved was dead. His wife, his children, his students. Some say it was coincidence. Some say it was curse. I say it was karma. Actions have consequences, Bruce Lee. Especially when you wield power you don't fully understand. Bruce looked at the scroll. Part of him wanted to dismiss this as superstition, but another part, the part that had studied philosophy, that believed in balance and consequence, felt the weight of what was being offered. Why me? Why now? Because I'm dying. Cancer. 3 months, maybe less. I'm the last keeper of this scroll. If I don't pass it on, the knowledge dies with me. And because in 3 months, you'll face a choice that will define your entire career. This technique will be part of that choice. What choice? You'll know when it comes. Study the scroll, master the technique, but remember the oath. Never for glory, never for gain, only for necessity, only for truth. The old man walked to the door, paused. "One more thing. If you choose to use this in your films, you'll become the biggest star in the world. Your movies will break every record, but you'll lose something far more valuable. Your soul, your family, your life. The choice will be yours." He left. The door closed. Bruce stood alone in his apartment, staring at the ancient scroll on his table. Part of him thought it was nonsense, superstition, old man's ravings. But he opened the scroll anyway. What Bruce Lee saw in that scroll would change everything. But the real test wouldn't come for 6 months, when a Hollywood director made him an offer he couldn't refuse. For 3 months, Bruce studied the scroll in secret. The technique was called Dragon's Breath, a combination of striking, locking, and energy manipulation that Chen Wu had spent 40 years perfecting. It wasn't just physical, it was mental, spiritual. The scroll described not just movements but the philosophy behind them, the breathing, the meditation, the way energy flowed through the body. Bruce practiced alone, late at night after Linda and the children had gone to sleep, in the apartment, in empty parks, in the basement of his school, never in front of students, never recorded, never demonstrated. The technique was unlike anything he'd learned before. It required absolute calm, combined with explosive power, complete control paired with complete abandon. The scroll described it as becoming the dragon, ancient, patient, unstoppable. After 2 months, Bruce began to understand it. Not just the movements, but the essence, the way it changed how he saw combat. Every opponent had a rhythm, a pattern. Dragon's Breath was about breaking that rhythm, creating chaos in their flow while maintaining perfect order in yours. After 3 months he'd mastered it, or at least he thought he had. The scroll warned, true mastery comes only when you choose not to use it. Only then do you understand the technique's true power, the power of restraint. One morning in June, Bruce received a telegram. The old man had died, cancer as predicted. The telegram included a note. You are now the keeper. Use wisdom. Remember the oath. Bruce burned incense that night, not because he was traditionally religious, but because it felt right, a gesture of respect to the old man, to Chen Wu, to the 300-year lineage he now carried alone. 2 weeks later, the phone call came. Bruce, it's Fred Weintraub. I've got news. Warner Brothers wants to produce a major martial arts film. Hollywood budget, international release. They want you as the star. Bruce's heart raced. This was it. The opportunity he'd been fighting for. A chance to bring kung fu to the world stage. To change cinema forever. What's the project? It's called Enter the Dragon. Fighting tournament on an island. Spy elements. Action. Philosophy. Everything you've been talking about. They're giving you creative control over fight choreography. This is your shot, Bruce. This could make you the biggest star in the world. Bruce felt something twist in his stomach. The old man's words echoed. In 3 months, you'll face a choice. Send me the script, Bruce said. When the script arrived, Bruce read it in one sitting. It was good. Really good. A vehicle that could showcase everything he'd been working toward. The fights would be spectacular. The philosophy would be present. This could change everything. But as he read, his mind kept returning to Dragon's Breath. The technique from the scroll. If he used it in the film, even a modified version, the fights would be unlike anything cinema had ever seen. Audiences would be mesmerized. The film would be legendary. But the oath, never for glory, never for gain. Bruce spent 3 days thinking, barely eating, barely sleeping. Linda noticed. What's wrong? She asked one evening. This should be exciting. Your big break. I'm trying to decide something. What? He couldn't tell her about the scroll, about the oath, about the old man's warning. Instead, he said, whether to give them everything I have or hold something back. Why would you hold back? Because some things are sacred. Some things shouldn't be commodified, turned into entertainment. Linda studied him. You've been different these past 3 months. Training alone, burning incense. What happened? I learned something, a technique, a philosophy. But I made a promise not to use it for public consumption. And now I have to choose, use it and make this film extraordinary, or keep my promise and make something merely good. Is merely good enough? That was the question, wasn't it? Bruce Lee had never settled for merely good in his life. Excellence was his standard, perfection his goal. Could he make a film knowing he was intentionally holding back, knowing it could be better if he broke his promise? The shooting began in January 1973. Bruce threw himself into the work. The fight choreography was spectacular, revolutionary. He brought elements from multiple styles, made the combat look real in a way Hollywood had never seen. But he never used Dragon's Breath, not once, not even modified. He kept the oath, and it was killing him. 3 months into filming, Bruce Lee made a decision that would haunt him, a decision that would change the movie and his fate forever. April 1973. The Enter the Dragon production was behind schedule. The fight scenes were taking longer than planned. The studio was getting nervous, the director was feeling pressure, and Bruce Lee was exhausted. He'd been working 16-hour days, acting, fight choreography, training the other actors, doing his own stunts, pushing his body beyond its limits. One night, after a particularly difficult shoot, the director pulled Bruce aside. We need to talk about the final fight, the one with Han in the mirror room. What about it? It's not working. The choreography is good, but it's not spectacular, not climactic enough for the film's finale. We need something that will blow audiences away, something they've never seen before. Bruce knew what the director wanted, something more, something revolutionary, something like Dragon's Breath. I'll work on it, Bruce said. That night, alone in his apartment, Bruce pulled out the scroll, read it again. The technique was there. Every movement, every principle. He could adapt it for the fight scene, make it cinematic, make it legendary. Nobody would know its true origin. Nobody would know he'd broken the oath. It would just look like brilliant choreography. The film would be a masterpiece. His career would explode. Everything he'd worked for would come to fruition. His hand reached for his notebook, started sketching out how Dragon's Breath could be modified for the mirror room sequence, the way the movements would look on camera, the way the energy would translate to film. He worked for 2 hours. The sequence was perfect, breathtaking, unlike anything cinema had ever seen. Then he stopped, looked at what he'd created, and remembered the old man's words. If you choose to use this in your films, you'll become the biggest star in the world, but you'll lose something far more valuable. Bruce tore up the pages, every single one, threw them in the trash, went back to the original choreography he'd planned. Good, but not extraordinary. Revolutionary, but not legendary. The next day, he shot the mirror room fight scene without Dragon's Breath. It was spectacular. The mirror effects, the choreography, Bruce's charisma. Critics would later call it one of the greatest fight scenes in cinema history, but Bruce knew it could have been better, and that knowledge aided him. 2 months later, Enter the Dragon wrapped. Bruce was exhausted, more than exhausted, depleted. The headaches that had been occasional were now frequent. He'd lost weight. His energy was low. Linda begged him to see a doctor. He refused. Too much work to do. Too many projects. Too many responsibilities. On July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee died in Betty Ting Pei's apartment. Cerebral edema, brain swelling. The doctors said it was a reaction to pain medication combined with overwork and stress. But Bruce knew the truth in his final moments. He hadn't broken the oath. He'd kept his promise to the old man. He'd held back Dragon's Breath. But the stress of that decision, the constant pressure, the knowledge that he could have done more but chose not to, the internal conflict between ambition and integrity, had pushed his body past its breaking point. He'd chosen honor over glory, integrity over fame, the oath over the career, and it had cost him everything. But the story doesn't end with Bruce Lee's death. Because 30 years later, someone found the scroll, and what they discovered changed everything we thought we knew. Hong Kong, 2003. 30 years after Bruce Lee's death, Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, was going through storage boxes from her father's apartment. The family had kept them sealed for decades, unable to face sorting through Bruce's belongings. But Shannon was writing a book about her father. She needed to understand him better. In a cardboard box marked Personal Private, Shannon found it, a silk scroll. Ancient, yellowed, tied with red cord. Characters in old-style Chinese she could barely read. There was a note with it, in Bruce's handwriting. To whoever finds this, I kept my oath. I never used this technique for glory or gain. The old man was right. True mastery is restraint. If you choose to continue the legacy, remember, some things are more important than fame, honor, integrity, the promises we make to those who believe in us. This technique could have made me the biggest star in the world. Instead, I chose to be a man of my word. I don't regret it. Bruce Lee, July 1973. Shannon stared at the scroll. Her father had died the month he wrote that note. Had this somehow contributed to his death? The stress? The internal conflict? She consulted with martial arts historians, tracked down records, found references to Chen Wu, a legendary master from the Qing dynasty, found mentions of a hidden technique that was supposedly passed down through only one lineage. Finally, she found someone who could read the ancient script, Professor Wei, an elderly scholar specializing in historical martial arts texts. Professor Wei's hands trembled as he examined the scroll. This is authentic, 300 years old. The technique described here, I've read references to it in historical texts, called Dragon's Breath. It was said to be unbeatable, but I thought it was legend. My father never used it? If he had, we would know. A technique like this, performed by someone of Bruce Lee's caliber, it would be unmistakable. Every fight choreographer in the world would have tried to copy it. But I've watched all your father's films. This isn't in any of them. Why not? If it could have made him legendary. Professor Wei pointed to a passage in the scroll. This, the oath. See here? He who uses this technique for personal glory will lose all he holds dear. Your father was many things, but he was not a promise breaker. He kept the oath, even when it cost him his dreams. Shannon felt tears forming. All these years, she'd wondered if her father had held something back. If there was a reason Enter the Dragon felt like it could have been more. Now she knew. He had held back. Not because he couldn't do better, but because he'd chosen not to. What should I do with this? Shannon asked. Professor Wei was quiet for a long time. That depends. Do you want to honor your father's choice? Or do you want to reveal what he kept hidden? Shannon thought about it for weeks. The scroll could be worth millions to museums, collectors, martial arts schools. She could demonstrate dragon's breath, show the world what Bruce Lee had chosen not to show. Or she could do what her father did, keep the oath, honor the promise. She chose to keep it hidden, locked it in a safety deposit box, told no one except her closest family members. The technique would remain secret, as Chen Wu had intended, as the old man had requested, as Bruce Lee had honored. But she did one thing differently. She wrote about it, in her book about Bruce Lee, not revealing the technique itself, but revealing that it existed, revealing that her father had made a choice between fame and honor, and chose honor. The book was published in 2005. That chapter, The Forbidden Scroll, became the most talked about section. Some people believed it. Others thought it was legend, storytelling to add mystique to Bruce Lee's legacy. But martial arts masters across the world read it and recognized the truth. They knew what it meant to hold back, to possess a technique you never use, to choose restraint over demonstration. It made Bruce Lee's legend even greater. Not because of what he'd done, but because of what he'd chosen not to do. But there's one final piece to this story. Because in 2019, someone claimed they'd learned dragon's breath, and what happened next would prove whether the curse was real. 2019, Los Angeles. A martial arts instructor named Marcus Chen, no relation to Bruce Lee or Chen Wu, announced publicly that he'd discovered dragon's breath technique through ancient research and meditation. He began teaching it in his school, charging premium prices, filming demonstrations for YouTube. The videos went viral. Marcus Chen became famous overnight, the man who found Bruce Lee's lost technique. Interviews, seminars, a book deal. Immediately knew Marcus hadn't found the real technique. What he was demonstrating was improvised, flashy, but not authentic, a pale imitation based on speculation and guesswork. She could have exposed him, proven he was a fraud, but she chose not to, because exposing him would mean revealing what the real technique looked like, breaking her father's oath. Instead, she sent him a private message. What you're teaching isn't the real dragon's breath, but even if it was, you should stop. The oath still applies. Fame built on sacred knowledge has consequences. Marcus ignored the warning. His school grew. His fame increased. He signed a deal for a Netflix documentary series. 6 months later, Marcus Chen's life fell apart. The documentary revealed that he'd been lying about his credentials. Multiple martial arts organizations exposed him as a fraud. Students began reporting injuries from his improper teaching. Lawsuits piled up, his school closed, his reputation destroyed. He gave one final interview, defeated. I thought I could shortcut my way to greatness, use someone else's legacy for my own gain. I was wrong. Some things are sacred, some knowledge shouldn't be commodified. I understand that now, but it's too late. Shannon watched the interview from her home, felt no satisfaction in being right, just sadness that another person had learned the lesson the hard way. She returned to the safety deposit box one more time, looked at the ancient scroll, her father's note beside it, and made a final decision. She would ensure the technique died with her. No children, no students, no successors. When she passed away, she would have the scroll cremated with her. The 300-year lineage would end. Dragon's breath would return to legend, because some knowledge is too powerful, some techniques too dangerous, some oaths too sacred to break. Her father had understood that, had chosen honor over ambition, integrity over fame, and in doing so, had become more legendary than any technique could have made him. Present day. A martial arts documentary filmmaker named James Park was researching Bruce Lee's life for a comprehensive film. He'd interviewed dozens of people, watched hundreds of hours of footage, read every book, but something bothered him about Enter the Dragon. The final fight, the mirror room sequence. It was spectacular, but there was something in Bruce's eyes, a hesitation, a holding back. James tracked down the original crew members, found the cinematographer, now 82 years old. I remember that shoot, the old cinematographer said. Bruce was exhausted, but more than that, conflicted, like he was fighting two battles, one on camera, one inside himself. What do you mean? Between takes, I saw him looking at his hands, like he was debating something, like he knew a secret he couldn't tell. I asked him once if he was okay, and it's the hardest choice I've ever made. James researched further, found Shannon Lee's book, read about the scroll, reached out to her. They met at a cafe in Los Angeles. Shannon was 55 now, looked remarkably like her father. Sharp eyes, determined expression. You want to know about the scroll, Shannon said. Not a question. I want to understand your father's choice, why he held back, because some things are more important than being the best, being remembered as the greatest. Sometimes keeping your word is more important than keeping your fame. Do you regret it, that the world never saw what he was truly capable of? Shannon smiled sadly. Every day, and never. I regret that the world didn't get to see the full extent of his genius, but I'm proud that he chose integrity over glory. In a world where everyone sells out, where everyone compromises, my father held the line. He had the opportunity to use dragon's breath, to make himself unstoppable, legendary beyond measure, and he said no. How many people can say that? What if I want to tell this story, the truth about the scroll? Then tell it, but tell it right. This isn't a story about a curse or a forbidden technique. It's a story about a man who chose to be more than great. He chose to be good, and that's rarer than any martial arts technique ever created. James made the documentary, called it The Dragon's Choice. It premiered at Sundance in 2025, won awards, changed how people viewed Bruce Lee, not just as a martial artist or actor, but as a philosopher who lived his principles even when it cost him everything. The final scene of the documentary shows footage of Bruce Lee training alone, just shadowboxing, perfect technique, complete control, and in his eyes, peace, the peace of knowing he'd made the right choice. White text on black. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973, at age 32. Enter the Dragon was released 1 month later. It became the highest-grossing martial arts film of all time and made Bruce Lee an international legend. The ancient scroll remains in Shannon Lee's possession. She has stated it will be destroyed upon her death, ending the 300-year lineage of Dragon's Breath. When asked if she regrets her father never using the technique, Shannon said, "My father taught me that real strength isn't about what you can do, it's about what you choose not to do. He could have been the greatest fighter in cinema history. Instead, he chose to be a man of integrity. That's more impressive than any technique." Final image, the ancient scroll sealed in red cord, lying on a table with incense burning beside it. Voiceover, Bruce Lee's actual voice from an interview. "I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. But we should all be in this world to live up to the promises we make. That's what defines us. Be water. End."